what they don't teach you in school. So today I'm splitting the streams, so this is going to be shorter than they have been, which hopefully will be a nice propose. The next stream will be 45 minutes of gaming, hopefully. 3 by 12 by plus 5. So I'm going to read for 12, 5, read 5, read 5, and then I'm going to game the same. Chapter 3, The Struggle for Existence. Errors on Natural Selection. The term used in a wide sense, geometrical powers of increase, rapid increase of naturalized animals and plants, nature of the checks to increase, competition universal, effects of climate, protection from the number of individuals, complex relations of all animals and plants throughout nature, struggle for life most severe between individuals and varieties of the same species, often severe between species of the same genus, the relation of organism to organism, the most important of all relations. Before entering on the subject of this chapter, I must make a few preliminary remarks to show how the struggle for existence bears on natural selection. It has been seen in the last chapter that amongst organic beings in a state of nature, there is some individual variability. Indeed, I am not aware that this has ever been disputed. It is immaterial for us whether a multitude of doubtful forms be called species or subspecies of varieties. What rank, for instance, the 200 or 300 doubtful forms of British plants are entitled to hold, if the existence of any well-marked varieties be admitted, but the mere existence of individual variability, and of some few well-marked varieties, though necessary as the foundation for the work, helps us but little in understanding how species arise in nature. How have all those exquisite adaptations of one part of the organization to another part, and to the conditions of life, and of one distinct organic being to another being, been perfected? We see these beautiful co-adaptations most plainly in the woodpecker and mistletoe, and only a little less plainly in the humblest parasite which clings to the hairs of a quadruped or feathers of a bird, in the structure of the beetle, which dives through the water, and the plum seed which is wafted by the gentlest breeze. In short, we see beautiful adaptations everywhere and in every part of the organic world. Again, it may be asked, how is it that varieties, which I have called incipient species, become ultimately converted into good and distinct species, which in most cases obviously differ from each other, far more than do the varieties of the same species? How do those groups of species, which constitute what are called distinct genera, and which differ from each other more than do the species of the same genus, arise? All these results, as we shall more fully see in the next chapter, follow from the struggle for life. Owing to this struggle for life, any variation, however slight and from whatever cause proceeding, if it be in any degree profitable to an individual of any species, in its infinitely complex relations to other organic beings and to external nature, will tend to the preservation of that individual, and will generally be inherited by its offspring. The offspring also, which thus have a better chance of surviving, for of the many individuals of any species which are periodically born, but a small number can survive. I have called this principle, by which each slight variation, if useful, is preserved, by the term of natural selection, in order to mark its relation to man's power of selection. We have seen that man by selection can certainly produce great results, and can adapt organic beings to his own uses, through the accumulation of slight but useful variations given to him by the hand of nature. But natural selection, as we shall hereafter see, is a power incessantly ready for action, and is as immeasurably superior to man's feeble efforts as the works of nature are to those of art. We will now discuss in a little more detail the struggle for existence. In my future work, this subject shall be treated as it well deserves at much greater length. The elder de Candolle and de Lyell have largely and philosophically shown that all organic beings are exposed to severe competition. In regard to plants, no one has treated this subject with more spirit and ability than W. Herbert Dean of Manchester. Evidently, the result of his great horticultural knowledge, nothing is easier than to admit in words the truth of the universal struggle for life, or more difficult, at least I have found it so, that constantly to bear this conclusion in mind. Yet, unless it be thoroughly ingrained in the mind, I am convinced that the whole economy of nature, with every fact on distribution, rarity, abundance, extinction, and variation, will be dimly seen or quite misunderstood. We behold the face of nature bright with gladness. We often see superabundance of food. We do not see, or we forget that the birds, which are idly singing round us, mostly live on insects or seeds, and are thus constantly destroying life. Or we forget how largely these songsters, or their eggs, or their nestlings are destroyed by birds and beasts of prey. We do not always bear in mind that though food may be now superabundant, it is not so that all seasons of each recurring year. Sorry, I want to check something. 4:34. I'm thinking I'm gonna game. I'm splitting the stream, so I'm thinking about when. I should premise that I use the term struggle for existence in a large and metaphorical sense, including dependence of one being on another, and including, which is more important, not only the life of the individual, but success in leaving progeny. Two canine animals in a time of dearth may be truly said to struggle with each other, which shall get food and live. But a plant on the edge of a desert is said to struggle for life against the drought, though more properly it should be said to be dependent on the moisture. A plant which annually produces 1,000 seeds, of which on an average only one comes to maturity, may be more truly said to struggle with the plants of the same and other kinds which already clothe the ground. The mistletoe is dependent on the apple and a few other trees, but it can only, in a far-fetched sense, be said to struggle with these trees. For if too many of these parasites grow on the same tree, it will languish and die. But several seedling mistletoes, growing close together on the same branch, may more truly be said to struggle with each other. As the mistletoe is disseminated by birds, its existence depends on birds, and it may metaphorically be said to struggle with other fruit-bearing plants. In order to tempt birds to devour and thus disseminate its seeds rather than those of other plants, in these several senses which pass into each other, I use for convenience sake the general term of struggle for existence. Struggle for existence inevitably follows from the high rate at which all organic beings tend to increase. Every being which during its natural lifetime produces several eggs or seeds must suffer some destruction during some period of its life, and during some season or occasional year. Otherwise, on the principle of geometrical increase, its numbers would quickly become so inordinately great that no country could support that product. Hence, as more individuals are produced than can possibly survive, there must in every case be a struggle for existence, either one individual with another of the same species, or with the individuals of distinct species, or with the physical conditions of life. It is the doctrine of Malthus applied with manifold force to the whole animal and vegetable kingdoms. For in this case, there can be no artificial increase of food, and no prudential restraint from marriage, although some species may be now increasing more or less rapidly in numbers, all cannot do so, for the world would not hold them. There is no exception to the rule that every organic being naturally increases at so high a rate that if not destroyed, the earth would soon be covered by the progeny of a single pair. Even slow-breeding man has doubled in 25 years, and at this rate, in a few thousand years, there would literally not be standing room for his progeny. Linnaeus has calculated that if an annual plant produced only 2 seeds, and there is no plant so unproductive as this, and their seedling next year produced 2, and so on, then in 20 years there would be 1,000,000 plants. The elephant is reckoned the slowest breeder of all known animals. I have taken some pains to estimate its probable minimum rate of natural increase. It will be under the mark to assume that it breeds when 30 years old, and goes on breeding till 90 years old, bringing forth 3 pairs of young in this interval. If this be so, at the end of the 5th century, there would be alive 15 million elephants descended from the first pair. But we have better evidence on the subject than mere theoretical calculations, namely, the numerous recorded cases of the astonishing rapid increase of various animals in a state of nature. When circumstances have been favorable to them during 2 or 3 following seasons, still more striking is the evidence from our domestic animals of many kinds which have run wild in several parts of the world. If the statements of the rate of increase of slow-breeding cattle and horses in South America and laterly in Australia had not been well authenticated, they would have been incredible. So it is with plants. Cases could be given of introduced plants which have become common throughout the whole islands in a period of less than 10 years. Several of the plants, such as a cardoon and a tall thistle, now most numerous over the wide plains of the Plata, clothing square leagues of the surface almost to the exclusion of all other plants, have been introduced from Europe, and there are plants which now range in India, as I hear from Dr. Falconer, from Cape Cameron to the Himalaya, which have been imported from America since its discovery. In such cases, endless instances could be given. No one supposes that the fertility of these animals or plants has been suddenly and temporarily increased in any sensible degree. The obvious explanation is that the conditions of life have been very favorable, and that there has consequently been less destruction of the old and young, and that nearly all the young have been enabled to breed. In such cases, the geometrical ratio of increase, the result of which never fails to be surprising, simply explains the extraordinary rapid increase and wide diffusion of naturalized productions in their new homes. So, cutting it in half today. So today, we're now, let's see if there's any, I don't have to worry about any viewers. Okay. 5 minutes. Take a 30-second gap there. 45, I think. Alright, so the concept of rapid increase was introduced. Very, very lightly touched on was natural selection. So the rate of increase of new offspring was introduced at the end of that. So if we have a successful business and other businesses or franchises spiral off of it, of course we're going to have lots of variety, and it's very quick before a new form of organization takes over. It's like McDonald's from beginning to now, and their structure or corporate structures that have taken over. It doesn't mean they're long-term valuable, especially perhaps, as you said, in times when the seasons are good and there's lots of food, they proliferate. So there's a serious consideration to say that during the growth time, there's an old rule, strong men create strong times create weak men, weak men create weak times create strong men. And so the cycle, so to say, would be when things are really good, you can have much more variety and all the different versions of you can try out a whole bunch more laws, and then things get rougher, and then it starts to tighten off and squeeze off all the new varieties that within that group that were less competitive, and only the best can survive because there's limited supply. And we're entering it. Well, it looks like it could be a dark age type scenario. A dark age, perhaps in the sense, not in the traditional sense of losing everything, but in the sense of not having access to everything. There seems to be a propaganda push to pull access to information away from the public. So if they do manage that, then the internet does get turned into like Chinese internet. There's enough resistance, it's hard to say. A dark age can last, a tyranny can last a very short time to a long time. We're approaching the point of the fall of our democracy. Well, we could see
hard to say what's going to come from this. Just our generally broad strokes, long-term speaking, in the evolutionary effects and impacts. So we got a lot of variety, but will McDonald's be able to survive in with its whole new variety? I'm sure forms of McDonald's or something similar would survive. It's a new species of restaurant, you could say. But in the long run, will the other forms survive? Will the competition that mimics McDonald's survive, or will we only have one when things tighten up? Or will franchise stores pop up that are similar but they're unique in name and they just look similar and use a similar style but are personally owned, personally operated, and different in that respect? One more minute for I'm at my 17 minutes. Yeah. And the rapid rate depends on how slow the business is to grow. So a quick growing business like, say, Uber, Facebook, Instagram, they all, in their varieties, are spreading very quickly in a few years. So in a few generations of social media, we've already seen several varieties pop up that could be almost indistinguishable species, where a more traditional, slower to grow business takes many generations. Landscaping outfits, they kind of fall into eventually a certain corporate structure when they get big enough, but it takes a long time for them to get there, end up competing, and usually, due to the nature of the work, they need to be very franchisable. I haven't seen any super corporate franchise of landscaping myself, but it could happen with the right, if it's popped up somewhere, it'll happen, right? Usually people start in landscaping and go away from it rather than stay in it. Okay, next part. Oh, I should have taken a 45-second break. I need to start taking those breaks. I proceed to another advantage of the ancient forum. I mean the form of proceeding and the rules of practice observed in those days. Our modern custom is, I grant, more conducive to truth and justice, but that of former times gave to eloquence a free career, and by consequence greater weight and splendor. The advocate was not, as now, confined to a few hours. He might adjourn as often as it is suited his convenience. He might expatiate as his genius prompted him, and the number of days, like that of the several patrons, was unlimited. Pompey was the first who circumscribed the genius of men with narrower limits. In this third consulship he gave a check to eloquence, and, as it were, bridled its spirit, but still left all causes to be tried according to law and the forum before the praetors. The importance of the business, which was decided in that court of justice, will be evident if we compare it with the transactions before the centurions, who were at present have cognizance of the matters whatever. We have not so much as one oration of Cicero or Caesar, or of Brutus, Caelius, or Calvus, or any other person famous for his eloquence, which was delivered before the last mentioned jurisdiction, excepting only the speeches of Asinius Pollio, for the heirs of Umbrina. But those speeches were delivered about the middle of the reign of Augustus, when after a long peace with foreign nations and a profound tranquillity at home, that wise and politic prince had conquered all opposition, and not only triumphed over party and faction, but subdued eloquence itself. What I'm going to say will appear, perhaps, too minute. It may border on the ridiculous and excite your mirth. With all my heart, I will hazard it for that very reason. The dress now in use at the bar has an air of meanness. The speaker is confined in a closed robe, and loses all the grace of action. The very court of judicature, and another objection. All causes are heard, at present, in little narrow rooms, where spirit and strenuous exertion are unnecessary. The orator, like a generous steed, requires liberty and ample space. Before a scanty tribunal his spirit droops,
and the dullness of the scene damps and powers of genius. Add to this, we pay no attention to style, and indeed, how should we? No time is allowed for the beauties of composition. The judge calls upon you to begin, and you must obey, liable at the same time to frequent interruptions while documents are read and witnesses examined. During all this formality, what kind of an audience has the orator to invigorate his faculties? 2 or 3 stragglers drop in by chance, and to them the whole business seems to be transacted in solitude. But the orator requires a different scene. He delights in clamor, tumult, and bursts of applause. Eloquence must have her theatre, as was the case in ancient times when the forum was crowded with the first men in Rome, when a numerous train of clients pressed forward with eager expectation, when the people in their several tribes, when ambassadors from the colonies in a great part of Italy attended to hear the debate. In short, when all Rome was interested in the event. We know that in the case of Cornelius Scaurus, Milo Bestia, and Vatinius, the concourse was so great that those several causes were tried before the whole body of the people. A scene so vast and magnificent was enough to inflame the most languid orator. The speeches delivered upon those occasions are in everybody's hand, and by their intrinsic excellence, we of this day estimate the genius of the respective authors. We now consider the frequent assemblies of the people and the right of prosecuting the most eminent men in the state. If we reflect on the glory that sprang from the declared hostility of the most illustrious characters, if we recollect that even Scipio, Celia, and Pompey were not sheltered from the storm of eloquence, what a number of causes shall we see conspiring to rouse the spirit of the ancient forum? The malignity of the human heart, always adverse to superior characters, encouraged the orator to persist. The very players, by sarcastic allusions to men in power, gratified the public ear, and, by consequence, sharpened the wit and acrimony of the bold declaimer. Need I observe to you that in all I have said I have not been speaking of that temperate faculty which delights in quiet times, supported by its own integrity and the virtues of moderation. I speak of popular eloquence, the genuine offspring of that licentiousness to which fools and ill-designing men have given the name of liberty. I speak of bold and turbulent oratory, that inflamer of people and constant companion of sedition, that furious incendiary that knows no compliance and scorns to temporize, busy, rash, and arrogant, but in quiet and well-regulated governments utterly unknown. Whoever heard of an orator at Crete or Lacedaemon? In those days, a system of rigorous discipline was established by the first principles of the Constitution. Macedonia and Persia eloquence are equally unknown. The same may be said of every country where the plan of government was fixed and uniform. At Rhodes, indeed, and also at Athens, orators existed without number, and the reason is, in those communities the people directed everything, the giddy multitude governed, and to say the truth, all things were in the power of all. In like manner, while Rome was engaged in one perpetual scene of contention, while parties, factions, and internal divisions convulsed the state, no peace in the forum, in the Senate no union of sentiment, while the tribunals of justice acted without moderation, while the magistrates knew no bounds, and no man paid respect to eminent merit. In such times it must be acknowledged that Rome produced a race of noble orators. As in the wild, uncultivated field, the richest vegetables will often shoot up, and flourish with uncommon vigor. Yet it is fair to ask, could all the eloquence of Gracchi atone for the laws which they imposed on their country? Could the fame which Cicero obtained by his eloquence compensate for the tragic end to which it brought him? The Forum, at present, is the last sad relic of ancient oratory. But does that epitome of former greatness give the idea of a city so well regulated that we may rest contented with our form of government without wishing for a reformation of abuses? If we accept the man of guilt, or such a labor under the hard hand of oppression, who resorts to us for our assistance? If a municipal city applies for protection, it is, when the inhabitants harassed by adjacent states or rent and torn by intestine divisions sue for protection. The province that addresses the Senate for a regard of grievances has been oppressed and plundered before we hear of the complaint. It is true we vindicate the injured, but to suffer no oppression would surely be better than to obtain relief. Find if you can, in any part of the world, a wise and happy community, where no man offends against the laws. In such a nation, what can be the use of oratory? You may as well profess the healing art, where ill health is never known. Let men enjoy bodily vigor, and in practice of physic will have no encouragement. In like manner, where sober manners prevail and submission to authority of government is national virtue, the powers of persuasion are rendered useless. Eloquence has lost her field of glory. In the Senate, what need of elaborate speeches, when all good men are already of one mind? What occasion for studied harangues before the popular assembly, where the form of government leaves nothing to the decision of a wild democracy, but the whole administration is conducted by the wisdom of a single ruler? And again, when crimes are rare, and in fact of no great moment, what avails the boasted right of individuals commence a voluntary persecution? What necessity for a studied defense, often composed in a style of vehemence, artfully addressed to the passions and gently stretched beyond all bounds? When justice is executed in mercy, and the judge is himself disposed to succor the distressed, believe me, my very good, and, as far as the times will admit, my eloquent friends, had it been your lot to live under the old republic, and the men whom we so much admire had been reserved for their present age, if some god had changed the period of theirs and your existence, the flame of genius had been yours, and the chiefs of antiquity would now be acting with minds subdued to the temper of the times. Upon the whole, since no man can enjoy a state of calm tranquillity and at the same time raise a great and splendid reputation, to be content with the benefits of the age in which we live without detracting from our ancestors is the virtue that best becomes us. Maternus concluded his discourse. There have been, said Messala, some points advanced, to which I do not entirely accede, and others which I think require further explanation. But the day is well nigh spent. We will, therefore, adjourn the debate. Be it as you think proper, replied Maternus, and if in what I have said you find anything not sufficiently clear, we will adjust those matters in some future conference. Hereupon he rose from his seat, and embracing Epicurus, I'm afraid, he said, that it will fare hardly with you, my good friend. I shall cite you to answer before the poets, and Messala will arrange you in the bar of antiquarians. And I replied, Epicurus, shall meet reprisals on you both, before the school professors and rhetoricians. This occasioned some mirth and raillery. We laughed and parted in good humor. End of the dialogue. That's notes in the dialogue concerning oratory. I think that might be it. We'll take a minute here to kind of scroll. I guess I need to find something else to read, or I can go back up in time. There's something I can do, there always is. Just a little rest to let it sink in. Okay, so the rest of it was lost to history, but the base ideas there certified memory. We have what happened. So there was a suggestion that the events of the situation then produced the eloquent oratory, that certain
So the role of the environment on it. So it's like in the context of communicating effectively, that means you have to play by the rules and in the system that you're given. So in the informal setting, you have much more informal activity to produce, to act out. And the formality depends on the organization. A small business might not be as formal, so you might, whereas a more corporate business would be far more formal. And of course, there's your duties as a citizen. So you really should make an appointment with your member of all your forms of member of parliament. Let them know where you stand politically, and ask them what they're doing for you in that respect. Hold them accountable and get them to know your problems that you think are the government's fault or the government's responsibility. So if there's something that the government's doing and you don't think it's a government responsibility, you can go in there and let them know that. You have your freedom to do that, and you really should if you're growing especially. Exercise your rights, otherwise they become weakened. And it's important. It's important to be able to effectively communicate. It's very important. And eloquence died in the orations because, so I would say the modern orator, it does sound like orators were somewhere similar between lawyers and parliamentary lawyers maybe. So maybe almost a lobbyist. Modern lawyers might be the people the public political figures of the day. People who, like Sargon of Akkad maybe would be, now that he's a politician as well as a media producer, that would technically make him an orator. He's trying to speak for a certain cause. Maybe a hired orator would be more somebody who's hired to make somebody's case specifically. This person should be hired for these reasons. Yeah, I don't really know the details, but it sounded like the courtroom becoming more orderly and organized in a specific fashion ruined oratory. It's like some things are more complex to say or take more time to say properly than others, and the courts no longer were amiable towards that goal and that form of governance. There's yeah. I'm just gonna stop here and yeah, we'll call that good. Take a rest. And at 34 minutes in, I will start the next bit. I think that's good enough there. Yeah, we'll get going. Chapter 12, Traveling. Reading gives fullness, writing exactness, and speaking readiness of information, but it remains for traveling to combine all of these things in one. To the traveler belong piquancy of conversation, liberality of view, and charity of judgment, which come only from contact with strange places and many people. No one can hope to become thoroughly polished and refined in the manners of his time unless he be cosmopolitan in his experience. Traveling is an art. To be successful, one needs an understanding of the many little rules and amenities
to be observed while en route, and in stopping at hotels and other places, full directions as to manners and what to do and what is to be done by the traveler follow. Duties of an escort. To a lady taking a journey, an escort is agreeable and acceptable. However ladylike, self-possessed, and capable of making the journey alone she may be, if a gentleman undertakes the escort of a lady, he should go with her to the depot or meet her there, attend to check in her baggage, purchase her ticket, procedure for her an acceptable seat in the cars, dispose of her hand baggage and packages properly, and strive to make her seat and surroundings agreeable. He should take a seat near her, or, if requested, by her side, and do all he can to make her journey a pleasant one. When her destination is reached, he should conduct her to a carriage or ladies' waiting room, until he has attended to her baggage according to her instructions. He should accompany her to whatever part of the city she wishes to go, and deliver her into the hands of her friends before relaxing his care. He should call upon her the following day and inquire after her health. It is optional with the lady whether the acquaintance shall be prolonged after this call. If the lady does not wish the acquaintance prolonged, she and her friends can have no right to ask a similar favor of him again. Duty of a lady to her escort. At the suggestion of her escort, the lady may allow him to defray the expense of her journey out of his own pocket without settling with him at the end of the journey, but she should not do this. She should offer him a sum of money ample to pay all expenses of the journey before purchasing her ticket. The former course should be pursued only when suggested by the gentleman, and a strict account of all expenses should be insisted upon. Ladies should be very particular about this point. All ladies should make no unnecessary demands upon her escort, and should cause him as little trouble as possible. Her hand baggage should remain undisturbed unless absolutely needed. She will gather her baggage together as the train nears the end of the journey, and, when the train stops, she will be prepared to leave the cars at once, and not cause her escort need this delay. It is the right of the duty of ladies to assist or render needed services to those who are younger or less experienced in traveling than themselves. They should be courteous, give advice, and strive to make the journey as pleasant as possible to younger or inexperienced ladies. It is optional whether an acquaintance formed in traveling is retained afterwards. If a lady is traveling alone, she may accept services from her fellow travelers. A gentleman should offer to raise or lower windows, offer his assistance in carrying packages from the car, engaging the carriage, or attending to a trunk. It is advisable, however, for ladies to study self-reliance. Young ladies should very rarely accept preferred assistance from strangers. Comfort and wants of others. In seeking his own comfort, a passenger should always consult the wishes and look to the welfare of passengers immediately around him. Do not raise a window unless you know it will not be discomfort to another. Look to the wants of elderly people and ladies before you think of your own. Do not rush and push in entering or leaving cars or boats. A selfish act might endanger the health of a fellow traveler. When traveling, discretion should be used in forming acquaintances. Ladies may accept small favors, but any attempt at familiarity must be checked at once. Gentlemen will not attempt familiarity. The practice of flirting with young men on the cars or a boat, so common among young girls, is unladylike and indicates extreme low breeding. If the journey is long and on a steamboat, fellow passengers should be sociable to one another, and a married lady or middle-aged lady is privileged to make the journey enjoyable. Retaining possession of the seat. A gentleman may take possession of the seat by depositing his overcoat or traveling bag upon it to show that it is engaged. He may then go to purchase his tickets or procure a lunch, and no one should take the seat unless thus engaged, not even for a lady. A gentleman leaving his seat and taking another in the smoking car cannot reserve his rights up to the first seat. He pays for one seat only, and in taking another he forfeits the first. A gentleman is not required to relinquish his seat in a railway car in favor of a lady, though a gentleman of good breeding will do so rather than allow a lady to stand or suffer inconvenience. No woman should be allowed to stand in a streetcar when seats are occupied by a gentleman. occupying too many seats. If a car is crowded, a lady will not retain more than her rightful seat. She should cheerfully arrange her baggage that the seat beside her may be occupied by anyone who desires it. If two persons, either gentlemen or ladies, are so ill-mannered as to turn over the seat in front of them and fill it with baggage and wraps, and retain it while others are unaccommodated, any person who wishes is justified in reversing the back, removing the baggage, and taking possession of the seats. Again, time. Riding and driving. Riding on horseback is one of the most healthful and animating amusements that can be engaged in, by either ladies or gentlemen. Young ladies should learn to ride on horseback and participate in this enjoyable exercise as much as possible. Too many young men think themselves above horseback riding, when in fact they cannot engage in a more fashionable, beneficial, and delightful amusement. Learning to ride. No one should attempt to appear in public on horseback until after practicing several times, or until he or she has learned to appear at ease. When riding, keep the body erect and the head up. Press your knees close to your horse's sides. Keep one arm close to your side and let it hang gracefully. Hold the reins in one hand and keep the hand directly over the horn of the saddle, with the elbow used close to your side. When a gentleman has an engagement to go riding with a lady, he should be very careful in selecting her horse, and should procure one that she can easily manage. It is his duty to see that her saddle and bridle are perfectly secure. Trust nothing to stable men without personal examination. He must not keep the lady waiting, clad in her riding costume, but he must be punctual at the appointed hour. Before he mounts himself, he must see that the lady is comfortably seated in her saddle. He should take his possession on the right of the lady in riding, open all gates, pay all tolls on the road, and be constantly on the lookout for anything that might frighten the lady's horse. Every attention possible should be rendered to her. The lady should place herself on the left side of the horse, standing as close to the saddle bow as possible. She will place one hand on the saddle and the other on the gentleman's shoulder as he kneels for the purpose, and the left foot on his hand, and by a slight spring will be nicely seated in the saddle. A gentleman will then adjust her foot to the stirrup, neatly fold the riding habit, and give her the reins and help her riding whip, assisting a lady to alight from her horse. The gentleman must assist the lady to alight after the ride. She should first free her knee from the pommel and disengage her habit. He must then take her left hand in his right, offer his left hand as a step for her. He then lowers his hand slowly and allows her to reach the ground gently, without springing. It is dangerous for a lady to spring from a saddle, and hence it should not be attempted. Riding with ladies. A gentleman should take his position on the right of a lady in riding. If there are two or more, his position is still to the right, unless his presence near one is requested, or assistance needed. It is the duty of a gentleman to offer all the courtesies of the road and yield the shadiest and best side to the ladies. The pace at which to ride must always be decided by the lady, and it is unkind to urge her horse to a more rapid gait than she desires. If the gentleman is riding alone and meets a lady who is walking and desires to speak with her, he must alight and remain on foot while talking to her. With her, driving and carriage etiquette. Ladies who are invited to drive with gentlemen at a certain hour should be ready exactly at that moment. It is neither well bred or dignified to keep anyone waiting who has made an appointment conducive to your pleasure. Have everything ready, gloves on and buttoned up, and all engagements of toilet complete. The seat facing the horses in a double carriage is the choicest, and gentlemen should always yield it to the ladies. The gentleman should sit opposite a lady in a two-seated carriage unless invited to sit by her. The right hand of the seat facing the horses is the place of honor, and belongs to the hostess, which she never resigns. It must be offered to the most dignified lady. If the hostess is not driving, no gentleman will smoke when driving with ladies. A lady who is invited to drive with a gentleman cannot offer to take a friend with her. A person, to prevent turning around in the carriage, should enter the back to the seat. A young lady driving with a gentleman should resent any undue approach to familiarity. Above all, she should avoid late hours of driving on a summer evening. It is her duty to remind her escort that it is growing late. It is not prudent to drive later than 9 o'clock, unless there is a party driving in company, or the escort is a relative or an old and trusted friend. A gentleman will not ask a young lady to compromise herself by driving with him at an unseemly hour. Fast driving should only be practiced with a fast horse. A pleasant rapid trot is safer and more enjoyable than going at a breakneck speed. The gentleman should always wear gloves when driving with a lady. It is the custom for the gentleman driving to sit on the right side of the lady, but in Boston it is the reverse unless the lady is his wife, sister, or not some near relative. A lady should always be sure that she has a safe escort and a safe horse. In driving, one should always remember that the rule of the road in meeting and passing another vehicle is keep to the right. It is rude to turn backwards and look at objects that have been passed, or to stare about things and point to houses, or to other parties and carriages. A dignified composure of manner should be maintained when driving, neither recline too much, or sitting up upright. To drive past all other carriages in a violent manner is inexcusable. In assisting a lady to enter a carriage, a gentleman will see that her skirt or dress is protected from the wheel, mud, or dust. A carriage robe should be provided for this purpose. Before seating himself, the gentleman should provide the lady with her shawl, parasol, and fan, and see that she is comfortable in every way. In assisting a lady to alight from a carriage, the gentleman will, when convenient, alight first. If to alight first he would have to pass in front of the ladies or step over them, it is better to aid them in alighting first. If there is a servant with the carriage, the lighter may hold open the door, but the gentleman must by all means furnish the ladies the required assistance. It should be remembered that the greatest politeness is, in such matters is to do that which the least embarrasses the ladies. If a lady has occasion to leave the carriage before the gentleman accompanying her, he must alight to assist her out, and wait on the pavement during her stay. If a lady wishes to speak with a friend or acquaintance who may be walking on the street, the gentleman should stop the carriage, open the door with one hand, and hold his hat in the other. It should be remembered by lovers that hedges and stone walls have ears. Many absurd scenes of lovemaking have been witnessed from behind the scenes. Interference with the driver implies a reproof, which is very offensive. If you are in fear of danger resulting from his driving, you must suggest a change, apologize thereafter, resign yourself to the driver's control, and be perfectly calm and self-possessed during the course of a drive. I think it's a good place to stop, if I'm right. We're just taking a little break before we stop. Right. So the etiquette discussed here is, I know I went over a little bit, but I'll pull it back here, is the etiquette of traveling and driving. So a woman can ask for a gentleman as an escort, but if she refuses a call from him, then she can't ask him for a favor again. That's an interesting point. Driving, I think it's hard to say if a car or a motorcycle is appropriate. I would say a motorcycle for the fuel efficiency, but I do also live in a cold place where a car in the winter is appropriate. If this description of driving sounds like there's always a driver, somebody else driving the carriage, I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know, but of course carriages could have been more expensive, so it could have been a thing that was different for the times. I'm going to suggest that etiquette while driving doesn't sound like it's changed much. For the horsing, mounting, motorcycles would be, I think, appropriate similarity. But the road has changed since the document has been written. I wonder if there's road etiquette, you drive too fast to stop. Unless maybe you're driving a bicycle or a motorized bicycle, which of course, if you are carefully building up from nothing, you should start with a bicycle for transit to increase your efficiency and decrease the time.
motorized bicycle from there to get further and increase your time, and then a motorcycle, and then from there you move up to a car. But due to the environment of where I'm from, it might be more appropriate to aim for the car right away. Although you can always sell the bike. Like there's, that's economics, though. That's a different topic. That's a topic for completely different situations. Oh, 1 minute left. Oh, yeah, I'm definitely getting quite tired. I'm just gonna put a note here. Etiquette, important. Etiquette while traveling is very important. You can save a seat. I didn't know that. But of course, when it's busy, you don't want to save a seat. You can stand if you're healthy, and somebody will offer you a seat if you're in polite company. If you're older and need more help. Well, anyway, I'm gonna call it there. Have a good one.